Monday. It's so good to have you here. Are you like exhausted by politics? I am. So I have a lot of very interesting material for you tonight. If you were watching on Friday, thank you, as I always say, you probably saw that we had this incredible exclusive one-on-one interview. It was Pastor John Paul Miller, the husband of Mica Miller, and that story has just been, it's confounded all of us, frankly, right? We just can't understand how a healthy, beautiful, seemingly happy young woman would just take her life just a few days after serving her husband with divorce. And then we started to see his behavior, and it was really weird. And we waited and tried to get his side of the story, and finally he agreed, and man, did he ever talk on Friday. And the things he said were pretty uncomfortable, especially for her family, because he kind of blamed them for everything. So we called them. And now they're doing a big exclusive interview with us, and tonight you will be seeing that. They respond to everything Pastor J.P. Miller said about his now late estranged wife, Mica Miller. All the things, all the lies, even the ones he copped to and then backtracked on. You will hear all of that in just a moment. Also, Karen Reed, it is official. They're going to retry her. So if you're not busy in early 2025, you too can sit through this whole thing again. Or can you? Because as it turns out, something kind of hinky happened. And her lawyer is making hay of it. Those are not the legal terms, but mark my words, they make sense. There are a couple of dates on the docket right now that will determine if young Karen Reed is actually going to have to stand trial 2.0. Or if her lawyer really outmaneuvered the prosecutors. Because when I first saw it, I thought it was a screw up. Now I think it's a strategy. I'll tell you all about it in just a minute. And then also late May, we took you to like Manhattan, and the story about this dog named Rocket. Such a cute little thing. His owner tossed him off an 8-story ledge, and he survived. And then that happened, the rescue, the dramatic rescue, the NYPD rushing Rocket to the hospital. And Rocket got surgery and a long road to recovery. And guess what? Rocket has been reunited with that rescuer, and we have the video. We're going to show you everything. So buckle up, get yourself a sarsaparilla or a whiskey. I recommend the whiskey. Because if you were here Friday, you know that we devoted that full hour to the exclusive interview with Pastor John Paul Miller. Aggrieved and grieving, the widower of Mica Miller. She took her own life back in April. Legally and officially, Pastor John Paul Miller has not been accused of anything related to Mica's death. Unofficially, he's been the subject of scorn and suspicion and worse, because of his documented behavior during their troubled marriage and his bizarre behavior after Mica died. We wanted Pastor Miller to share his side of the story, and oh boy, did he ever share. Here's a little taste.
I saw it coming for years. I told them for years this would happen over, and I said if she gets off her medicine, suicide is the next thing. She tried it in the past, but with me, she always remained okay with me. She was on her meds with me. She was healthy and happy. And even if she did get low or stop taking her medicine, I would help her get back on it, and things would be fine. Without me and with her family, she's off meds, and she committed suicide. Am I supposed to stay home and cry? Am I supposed to go out with my friends? Am I supposed to go to a bar and drink? I don't know what the right thing is. Right? As a pastor, should I just get on my knees and pray? I mean, I want to die in that moment. I can neither confirm nor deny that I've ever put on a Spider-Man costume. But you'll never see me in the same room with Spider-Man, I will say that. Oh, I've never done a legal drug my whole life. Okay. Well, crap, that was a lie. I'm sorry, that was a lie.
I'll be addressing that bit in a minute, like the whole that was a lie, because it wasn't the only one. Mica died by suicide just days after serving him with divorce papers, and there was a lengthy paper trail of his alleged abuses. The GPS tracker that he put on her car, the tires that he allegedly slashed, the topless photo that he apologized, posting that online, topless photo of Mica. But through it all, he told us that he was really just trying to save Mica from herself. He said he warned her family that she would die by suicide since he'd been unable to convince her to continue taking her meds. He said if anybody besides Mica is to blame for her death, he says it's her family. News Nation correspondent Rich McHugh reached out to that family, of course, for their response to all of this. And here's what Mica's sister, Anna Francis, and the family attorney, Regina Ward, had to say about all that.
What was it like watching this interview? How did it make you feel?
At one point, I burst down and started laughing. Like, just straight up started laughing. Because of just how ridiculous half of everything was. And we can prove basically everything he said wasn't true.
What part made you laugh?
Whenever you asked him if he had never, well, the first part that made me laugh was whenever you asked him, has he ever done any drugs? And he said, absolutely not, I would never. And then he goes, I just lied. And then said that he smoked or something, or didn't. Sat in the car when he was 16, whatever. And we know that he had done recreation things as a 40-year-old man in his 40s, late 30s. We know that for a fact. So we can prove that he's done it more than once. And then saying he's done steroids just once, tried it once, that's also, we can prove that he's done that more than once as well. And I don't know. It was silly to me that he everything he's saying, he's just giving kind of partial truth to.
Well, I think the biggest thing is if you go to the comments that were left, everyone was spot on. Everybody called him out, and it was easy, I think. You don't have to be a professional to detect a lie. And it was obvious, I think, that many things that came out of his mouth were falsehoods or recreations or exaggerations, partial truths with a little something added, partial truths with something missing.
Mica's family says that she once told her sister, quote, if I end up with a bullet in my head, it was JP. But in Rich McHugh's interview, JP, Pastor John Paul, emphatically denied that he ever abused Mica.
Have you ever abused your wife?
Never, not once in any way, shape, or form. I took better care of her than anybody could ever take care of her. I never made her, asked her to clean the house, not once in 7 years of marriage. She never had to cook a single meal. She never had to work. She was never harmed physically in any way.
But here is what Mica's sister and her attorney say about that.
Well, him just using a simple, he almost wanted to be thanked that she was never forced to clean her house. And he uses those small little things that he might have done that most people would say, oh, I wish I could have a house cleaner or something like that. He uses that as almost like a token. I get to do what I want now today because I didn't make you clean the house today.
Regina, you were working with Mica before she died.
Yes.
What was she telling you? I mean, she called the police about abuse, but tell us what she, if you can, what she was telling you she was going through.
Yeah, I absolutely can. You know, lawyers usually have a duty of confidentiality even to the grave, but I have the permission to speak about those things through Sierra, who's the special administrator over the estate. So she has assumed the shoes of Mica and speaks for her. So she's given me permission to talk about most of those things. Some no. But basically, Mica was telling me a lot of horrendous things that shocked my conscience, and I've been doing this for almost 20 years.
Abuse?
Yes.
What types of abuse?
Every kind that you can imagine, and even kinds that you can't imagine as a normal, rational human being. And to see this absolutely beautiful 20, well, she just turned 30, but she lived all of her 20s with this man. And she had such a beautiful spirit and an aura about her that you immediately knew that you sensed that she had a good heart, was a good woman, and she wanted to just be the best Christian woman there ever was. And she was having such a hard time reconciling between what God's teachings say about forgiveness and to pray for our enemies and so forth. and her duty as a wife, she felt spiritually. She struggled with these things because on one point it's God says that as a wife I need to be supportive of my husband, I need to be obedient, and I'm trying to do that, and at the same time God is telling me that I need to forgive someone who's abusing me. So she had a difficult time reconciling, that, where am I supposed to forgive my husband for abusing me, for doing these terrible things to me? And like in her video, these terrible, terrible, terrible things.
One question in particular got a big reaction from Pastor John Paul, who again took aim at Mica's family.
Do you feel that you did anything that you would change? Do you feel any part responsible?
God, that's a great question. Man, that's such a good question. Wow, what a good question. Can I have a second to think about it?
Sure.
Okay. Oh my gosh, that's such a good question. What would I do differently? Oh man. Oh, I know what I do. I would not involve her family when she's having mental episodes and is schizophrenic and is off her meds. I would never have texted them.
Naturally, Rich McHugh also addressed that moment with Mica's sister and her attorney.
If I'm condensing what I believe is his central defense, he relies heavily on saying she was on lithium, and when she was on her meds, she was good, and when she was off her meds, she was not good, and her family wanted her off her meds, and therefore I was the only person that was trying to really save her life. He ultimately lays blame on your family for this. What do you would want to say to that?
I would say that we wanted what Mica wanted. She wanted to run a charity and she wanted to go to Africa and do all that, and I said, wow, amazing, good for you. Like that's awesome. I'm not as good as person as you, basically, and like you have great aspirations for your life, everything you do. And if she said, I want to divorce John Paul, or I want to get back together, we would just support her, anything she said. So and again, on like the medicine, I think that's just his only way to kind of control the narrative, is to talk about how mentally ill she was whenever she wasn't mentally ill her whole life. She only had any kind of signs, in his opinion, of being mentally ill since the day they got married. And 3 to 4 months after they got married is when she was first hospitalized. And then it just kept happening, and we were starting to see a pattern. And even through that pattern, I sometimes would speak up, and to the point where John Paul actually served me with a cease and desist letter a few years ago, and also he put a stipulation on me and Mica's relationship and said, you have to write an apology letter to me to be able to talk to your sister. So if anyone was controlling whether Mica was speaking to her family, it was John Paul. Yeah. And I did not do what he said. I did not write an apology letter, because I was putting my beliefs out there. I was stating the truth, and what John Paul can't handle is the truth and what was happening in that situation. So I wasn't allowed to speak to my sister per John Paul for over a year. And then when she went to go leave him, I was able to have a relationship with my sister again.
What does your family want to say about this and their general response to his interview?
So glad you asked that question. Our family wants to have Mica remembered as the amazing person she was throughout all of this. We wouldn't shine any negative light on her, what she did, anything that would control her whole life. We would never even want to speak negatively about John Paul either, because that's not what Christians do either. We let, like, God can take control of this situation, then we let the law enforcement do what they need to do to protect Mica. The family has a lot of awesome plans for us to pick up where Mica left off in her charity work and everything. We want to continue to be that light towards the world that Mica was, and we don't want her absence to leave a hole or anything. We want to all fill that hole, and that's why we believe so much that Regina is a good person to help us do that, because then Mica's law can be introduced and more people can be helped. As much as John Paul thinks he's one of a kind person, there's tons of men like him, and there's tons of females like him that want to do the same thing to others that he did to Mica. And that's why this Mica's law is so important.
I'm joined now by News Nation investigative correspondent Rich McHugh, who conducted both the interviews with Pastor John Paul Miller and with Mica Miller's family. Rich, great job. Especially on like walking the tightrope, because a lot of this you've got to discuss mental health and it's very sensitive. But I want to just right off the top get your sense about Mica Miller's family. I mean, they're in mourning. They've lost her. She took her own life, and it's been just sort of a devastating series of weeks for them. But they seem very, very laser focused on a mission. Is that the sense that you got from them, that they have a plan?
100%, actually. They have not changed since I've met them, which is since this happened. They are laser focused. They are united. They talk daily as a family. Everything goes through a decision process. They're united front, and they extend that, I believe, to Regina, their attorney. They want to get justice for their sister. They want her story to get out. They're doing this to help other people so this doesn't happen to other people. But they also just want the truth out. They don't want this kind of hanging over them and her sister's legacy.
So I want to ask you about a couple of things, because you've done two very big interviews in a short period of time in which there was a lot of other breaking news. So forgive me if the audience is sort of catching up on some of this. But when you did the interview and we aired it on Friday with J.P. Miller, Pastor Miller, I mean, for those who didn't see it, the best way to characterize it is just bizarro. I mean, he seemed to cry at the drop of a hat, and crying seemed to be a central theme of the interview. Do I have that right?
1,000%, Ashley. I've done over 2,000 interviews in my career, and this was easily the craziest interview I've ever been a part of. The energy was like being on a roller coaster. I didn't know where we were going. Like, I would ask him a simple question, and all of a sudden it would elicit a response like we just saw. Several times he admitted, like, I asked him a question about, okay, you admitted, in a letter to Mica, you admitted that you'd hired a private eye, and you apologized for slashing her tires, and et cetera, et cetera. And I said, why did you stop the private eye? Why did you stop, why didn't you know where she was the day that she died? He said, oh, I stopped because I ran out of money. And so we moved on, and after the interview, he texted me, he said, I'm sorry, I lied. I'm so sorry. That was not the real reason. So this was like an all-day thing, and it was all over the map. He was fidgeting, touching his nose. I was just trying to hang on and make sure I got through my questions so that we got through the whole interview, and we did. We went for over 2 hours, so we got it all.
Well, it was a great interview. I think I was taken aback when right off the top he burst into tears almost before you even asked a question. And actually, I want to play a moment from your most recent interview with Mica Miller's family, and they reacted to all the crying. So let me roll that, and I'm going to ask you about it in a moment. Let's take a look.
Sure. When he started crying, did that feel like that was authentic to you?
As someone who attended Solid Rock for many years, he cried on stage almost every other Sunday. And I would invite friends to come with me because, I believe everyone should hear the word. And my friends would call it out and say, that was the fakest cry I've ever seen. And at first, I was almost going to defend John Paul. And then whenever I started seeing it over and over again, and people started pointing out all of his fake cries, then I just became numb to it, and then, obviously stopped going to the church, but he's just kind of known for doing that.
So, Rich, ultimately, is Mica's family happy that he did do this interview with you? And when I say that, obviously I'm angling here. Do they think they got something out of it, something that they actually might be able to use against him?
I believe they do. I've heard from several of the family members. They thanked me and News Nation for doing this in an extensive way. They said this will help us. I asked Regina, like, what comes of this? Like, what did you see? She said, oh, I plan to introduce this in court. There's a lot of ammunition. We were just provided. We understand, like, this, and in her words, the web of lies that he's going to use to try and defend himself in court. So, yes, undoubtedly, they want him to keep speaking. They were surprised that his attorney let him do this interview in the first place.
So I've been in the game for a long time, like a few decades. And I remember one of the first lessons in journalism was that we don't cover suicides. We don't want any copycats. We don't want to draw attention to that in a negative way. And this is a suicide. This is not a murder. John Paul has been charged with nothing. He hasn't been charged with abuse. He hasn't been charged with murder. No one thinks it's a murder in the official category. Unofficially, there's lots of chatter online. My question is, why does this story have such legs? There's something like 1 million people who watched that interview just online as of like this afternoon.
I think actually it's because there's a phrase that has been coming back to us in the feedback, and it's called coercive control. It's also something that Mica's family is fighting for. They're saying, yeah, it's abuse in their opinion. What she went through was abuse, but it's all under this umbrella of coercive control. And there's millions of people, men and women, across the United States who are in these situations facing coercive control, and they can't get out of it. And so I think that's why so many people this is having an effect on them. And Mica's their family are trying to pass this bill, I think it's called Mica's Law, which is about coercive control. And it would have set off a bunch of it would have tripped some alarm bells in the process, made it easier for her to leave. Whereas right now, like in the way the law currently is, it did not allow her an easy escape. Let's put it that way.
Rich McHugh, such great work. Thank you so much. Really appreciate that. And by the way, I don't want our audience to leave because, in a moment, we've got this whole jaw-dropping about face by the good pastor. Do you remember the apology letter that he wrote to Mica? The one that was teeming with regret for the way that he treated her. He now says he never meant a word of it. So perhaps it's no surprise that her family calls BS when he says he and Mica were on the road to reconciliation.
Our family does have evidence that the last time they had any interaction was in close proximity with each other. It was the complete opposite of what he's saying it was. They did not kiss, they did not hug, they did not talk about getting back together.
Also ahead, Mica's attorney says there may be evidence to support criminal charges against J.P. Miller. More of this exclusive interview next. At one point in the stormy marriage of Mica Miller and her pastor husband, John Paul Miller, he wrote her a letter apologizing for some of the nastier things that he'd done to her. For one, posting a topless photo of her on the internet. And two, vandalizing her car tires. JP wrote that he was trying to hurt Mica because she had hurt him, admitting that it was, quote, evil of him to do it. But in his exclusive interview with News Nation, he did a 180 on that. He backtracked. Not just on the apologies, but on the implied admissions of guilt as well. Here now is more of our exclusive interview with Mica's sister, Anna, and the family's attorney, Regina Ward. They both say that Pastor Miller's non-apology speaks volumes.
As far as the email and him saying that, we're all referring to it as the apology letter. He's spinning it just like he does with everything. He's been caught, okay, and now it's like, oh, how can I explain away? Because he always explains away everything. There's something else that's motivating whatever is happening. So now that that's come forward, then he's got to say, oh goodness, how do I overcome this? I've just admitted all of these things. Oh, I know what I'll do. I'll just say that I admitted them because Mica said that she wanted me to.
Our family does have evidence that the last time they had any interaction was in close proximity with each other. It was the complete opposite of what he's saying it was. They did not kiss, they did not hug, they did not talk about getting back together. She, in that, if asking for that letter, why would he just lie and just say he did all these things to get her back on medication? She had been off of that medication for months.
During the course of that interview, News Nation correspondent Rich McHugh showed Mica's sister and her lawyer video. This one. This is JP and Mica arguing at a car dealership just weeks before Mica's death. And Mica's sister says these are the pastor's true colors, and that the video may actually prove useful if he's ever prosecuted.
It looked like he just got out of bed or something. I don't know. It was apparent that she was being tracked back then because he just showed up out of nowhere without her telling him where she was, and that happened multiple times. He was again trying to control, embarrass her, and so she has to call the police and say, I don't want him here. And he just shouts things at her to get a rise out of her, just like he would in his interview. Say things towards the family to try to get a rise out of us. And she rose above that, and so is our family. We're going to rise above the things that he's trying to put out there that are not true.
It absolutely is evidence of abuse. And when Mica brought it to me and gave it to me, I was like, thank goodness that she got that. I wish it would have been longer, but she wasn't expecting him. So when she's trying to fumble around and get it going, and man, the minute that he saw that she got that going, that's when he's turning around to walk away. And I'm so grateful that she did get that, because I feel that without that little sliver of a video, that the world would not get an inside view of John Paul. He is very crafty in spinning his web. He is always spinning the narrative.
Spinning his web. The guy who cosplayed as Spider-Man next to his Wonder Woman wife, and who held on to that outfit for random walks around his neighborhood and around his town. But that's not a crime, is it? And the question still remains, will J.P. Miller, Pastor Miller, ever have to answer in criminal court or civil court for any part that he may have played in his wife's death? Mica's family attorney says if she has anything to say about it, yes.
Well, as far as putting someone behind bars, that takes a prosecutor that has to meet those burdens of proof. I think that I have lots of evidence that would certainly support potentially a charge. In Mica's situation, it's not one single event. It's not the one single photo. It's not the one single taking her car. It's not the one single, different things that he did to her. It is all of that put together, and in the totality of the circumstances, that becomes a crime. We can't let this fish go. Or should I say Spider-Man? And I would like to talk about that for a minute. Isn't that appropriate for him? Spider-Man spins webs to navigate through a city or through a town, wherever he's going. That's how he gets through. John Paul Miller is Spider-Man because he's always spinning a web to navigate through life. That's what he does.
Coming up tomorrow, Mica Miller in her own words. We have a voicemail that puts her relationship with her purportedly abusive husband in a vastly different light, one you haven't seen before. Plus JP's propensity to lie. He didn't just lie to a friend or a pastor or his wife. He lied to us. And he actually admitted it in writing. And we have all of the details right here tomorrow, so make sure you don't miss it.
Get